Hello everyone, Just Goran here, and it's October, so let's do something nice and thematically appropriate and look at an animal from the Planet Zoo Twilight Pack, the Striped Skunk. And yes, that's me, being bit by a skunk. You're probably wondering how I got in this situation. Well, stick around till the end to find out, because today we are looking at some real-life skunk habitats for some Planet Zoo inspiration. And we are starting off at AquaZoo Leeuwarden at what used to be the skunk and, as you can see in the background, also a raccoon habitat. So raccoon have gotten a new habitat and the skunk seemingly have disappeared from the zoo, with this area now going unused. Probably will be used for something in the future, but as you can see, it was a really nice habitat. I really liked the little bit of forest that you had. The barrier that was pretty simple in the back kind of disappeared in all of the foliage, so it really looked quite natural. As you cross a little bridge, you get to see that they have quite a large water section, mostly for the raccoons of course, and over here there was a little shelter building which the skunk had made home when I visited. There was also a raccoon who caught a bird who took it in there to eat it, and the skunks also ate from it, but then after that they hid under the little bridge over there. But yeah, really nice looking habitat. I really like this one. It's kind of a shame that it's not there anymore, but let's move over to the Zoo of Artis, the Zoo of Amsterdam, which is called Artis, and here we have a lovely lush skunk habitat, also once again mixed with raccoons. Got a little creek flowing down the middle there. It's a really lovely habitat. On the side over here, things are a little bit more open around all these shelter buildings. There's also a bit of a food enrichment item over there. And this is where I probably saw the most threatening skunk I've ever seen. They were really pissed for some reason. I'm not sure what was going on, but it certainly was really fun to see them moving like this. Definitely would say to the raccoon that he might need to watch out a little bit though. Next up we have Artisklas, a much smaller zoo, not really related to Artis. I think the founder of Artisklas was an old Artis employee, and that's how they got the name. But over here we have a cute little skunk enclosure, and you can see you walk over the enclosure, over this little bridge, these little rafters, and the enclosure does go underneath the path here. So we got a little bit of theming, I guess I want to say. This kind of is decorated like a stable with all the horse equipment, but I don't think that's used for anything in particular. And on the other side over here we got more enclosure, and we can see we even got an albino skunk right there, which is pretty freaking cool. And the enclosure, though it is not massive, it does have quite a bit of complexity to it. Lots of stuff, especially on this side, which you'd think make it quite an escapable enclosure for the skunks, but it doesn't seem to be much of an issue right there. And here's my favorite detail of this enclosure. In case of emergency, break the glass and you can get a gas mask. Really fun stuff right there from Artisklas. That's it. So let's move on to the next zoo. This is BestZoo, and here once again we have a shared enclosure with the raccoon and the skunk. Definitely a very common mix. We've already seen a lot of these enclosures in the raccoon habitat, of course, but just for completion's sake, we're looking at them again for the skunk. And this was a really nice habitat, a nice little island over here in the middle. Once again, with a little creek going through it, quite a bit of space, some climbing opportunities for the raccoon with the trees, but the skunk have moved out of this enclosure and they moved over here to this much smaller and a lot less good looking enclosure, I have to say. I think this one was used for the spotted skunk, but not anymore it seems. Unlike another zoo, Zoo Braunschweig. Over here we enter the zoo through the entrance over here, and the first thing we see is this awesome habitat over here, which is not only for the striped skunk, but also, of course, the raccoon and even opossum, which are really quite rare in Europe, so that was an awesome thing to see. As you can see, the raccoons have tons of climbing opportunities. Of course, those aren't for the skunks, they mainly stick around to the ground. This building, I think, is also mostly for the raccoons. We can also see one up there, which is absolutely insane. I can't believe that that's actually something this zoo has. And over here we can see a lovely little stream, and that is where I did eventually spot a skunk. But this isn't actually the only enclosure for them. And also, by the way, look at that barrier. It's so low. I can't really believe that that is actually escape proof for the raccoons, but Here we are. Now, as you keep walking along this habitat, eventually you come across another habitat over here, which is also home to the striped skunk. As you can see down there, a skunk is very elegantly climbing out of this barrel. This is another shared enclosure, but here we do spot some other animal, another type of skunk. It is the eastern spotted skunk, and they are so adorable. This was my first time seeing them, and I didn't actually know that they are a lot smaller than the other skunk, the striped skunk in particular. So that was just super adorable. I absolutely loved seeing them. It made the whole trip absolutely worthwhile. As you can see, there's also a lot of climbing frames in this enclosure, and we could see the animal using them, sitting around and now walking around in the distance over there. That is, of course, the North American tree porcupine. And yeah, here we see more striped skunk sitting in this part of the enclosure as well. So yeah, pretty nice enclosure. There's a lot to it, at least, even though it looks quite simple. But yeah, definitely that spotted skunk was super awesome, and I really enjoyed. But yeah, those were the two enclosures of the Zoo of Braunschweig. Now we are moving on to the Tiergarten Deltizsch, which also has a pretty simple, not huge enclosure for the skunk over here. It does have glass viewing all around, so you do get nice views of them, and there's also a little bit of a shelter building right there. I don't think they go into the building itself, just that little area right there. Anyway, next up we have Eindhoven Zoo, which is actually one of my favorite enclosures in this video. I absolutely love this shallow stream over here in the front of the habitat, which actually flows through the mesh fence into the beaver habitat beside it. As you can see, this is also a shared habitat with the raccoon once again, which have a lot of trees in the back of the enclosure to climb. They're often found in these barrels, and in particular the skunk has kind of its own barrel alongside the stream, which we'll see in a bit. Here you can see a little bit of the backstage, which is behind all these bushes over here. So going through the rain, there you can see over here there's actually a pipe leading into that backstage building, so that's how the animals can get inside. But yeah, over here is another viewpoint. Here the water is a little bit deeper. It doesn't go through all the rocks right there, which definitely looks a lot cooler. But there you can see the barrel of the skunk, which actually has a skunk lying in it. And as we pan to the left here, you can see the final viewing area of this enclosure, which is this roof viewing area, which I definitely needed on one of the days that all this footage comes from. It comes from like 3 separate visits. On one of the days I definitely needed the sheltered roof here because it was raining cats and dogs. It was crazy. But yeah, this is just one more amazing view of this awesome habitat. Now let's check in with the rainy day. Yeah, I was very glad to have this roof here. Now, next up we have Faunapark Flakkee. They have a very simple square habitat, some hot wire around the edges, skunk chilling in the shade underneath this little barrel right there. We do also have an indoor viewing area over here, so there you can see it's once again super simple, but there's also a skunk lying in there. Next up we have GaiaZoo, which has this beautiful lush large habitat for the skunks and raccoons. At least they're used to. This area has been closed off for quite a while for some renovations, mainly to the wolf enclosure that's beside this one, I'm pretty sure. I'm not sure what the future of the skunks and raccoons at GaiaZoo holds. I'm not sure what the exact plans for this area are, if this habitat will remains to be seen. I hope it does, because it's a really beautiful habitat, and it's nice that especially the raccoons have a place here. A lot of raccoons in Europe are taken from the wild because they are an invasive species here, and then they're put in zoos where they can't do any harm to our environments. So it's nice that they don't have to be killed and they can just live here. So I hope they can remain. But yeah, here we got another indoor view right here, and then we can move on to the next zoo. This is the Zoo of Hannover, where we have a very dedicated area over here for the raccoons. We have in the Yukon Bay area of the zoo Emma's General Store, and as we go inside, on the right hand side over here is a little squirrel enclosure, which is already pretty cool. But if we look to the other side, there is the actual general store, and that is the indoor area of the skunks, and it is so freaking cool. I absolutely love zoos that like incorporate animals into human environments like this. We'll see another one later on in the video, which I absolutely love as well. But yeah, this one is just really well done. Also, the only complaint I will have is that the outdoor enclosure isn't as amazing. They do have a lot of space indoors, which quite makes up for it pretty well. Also, I love this little emergency exit sign. Being a cowboy, that's just freaking fantastic. But yeah, as we go outside here, you can see the outdoor enclosure is a lot smaller. Now there is definitely enough indoor area to make up for that, and this is still on like the same size as many of the enclosures we've seen in this video already, so there's not too much to complain about there. But yeah, it is a thing that I noticed. Now over here at Harry Malter, we also have a lovely skunk enclosure with a skunk just kind of chilling in the grass there. This is a pretty simple enclosure as well, but we do once again have a nice little stream, mainly there of course for their co-inhabitants, the raccoons. They of course love that sort of stuff. The climbing frames you can see around here are also for them. I don't think the skunks will be getting much use out of that. Also sitting next to the raccoon, you can see we've got another much lighter colored skunk right there. But yeah, for a very simple zoo, it's quite a nice enclosure. And my favorite feature of it, however, is something quite similar to something we saw at one of the earlier zoos. But here we've got a beautiful drawing of this raccoon putting on a gas mask, which is just absolutely awesome. It really plays on that mixed habitat as well. And yeah, it's just really, really funny. I love it so much. Now, next up we have Kasteelpark Born. I didn't really get great footage of this enclosure. I basically walked past it twice without really looking at it. I was mostly distracted by the squirrels over here. And as we came around the bend again, you can see it on the right there, I was distracted by this peacock sitting on the path. So yeah, didn't record the enclosure that much. We do get one more look at it over here, and here I actually do finally look inside of it. So you can see there's some piles of logs, some things for the skunks to hide in, and we also get another backstage view, or at least indoor shelter view over here, although this one's completely covered in mesh, so you really can't look inside all that well, but it is there. So that's it for Kasteelpark Born. Then we have Tiergarten Kleve, where we have a pretty nice sizable habitat once again. We can see there's some anti-climbing in the trees, so we can probably expect some climbing animal. There is some nice piles of rocks with shelters in it. I also quite like this shelter over here, barrel up against the glass so you can see inside. They did have to put hot wire on top of the barrel though to prevent the animals from being able to climb on the barrel and then climb out of the enclosure, so that's quite funny right there. We can also see there's some other more regular glass views into the enclosure for when the animals are on the ground, but you might also find them up in these climbing frames. That's especially there for the North American tree porcupine that these skunks share the habitat with over here. Here you can also see, this is pretty fun, this building was built by some company and they put on some advertisements. That's something you often see in zoos as well. And the building is home to Bruce the porcupine. But yeah, that's it for Tiergarten Kleve over here. Let's move to Wildpark Lüneburger Heide. And while the enclosure here isn't amazing, I'm not a big fan of this mesh right here. It makes it quite difficult to look inside. I do like this little cooking pot over there, over the campfire. It looks like the animals have infiltrated some kind of campsite. What's interesting, the most interesting about this enclosure is the mix. It's probably one of the most unique mixes that I've seen. The skunk over here share the enclosure with the Arctic fox when it's sitting there in the back on a little rock right there. I don't know how it works, but I guess the Arctic fox just know not to mess with the skunks or they get sprayed. So that's, yeah, I guess it works. Over here, by the way, we are already in Monde Sauvage, entering this huge faux tree stump over here, which actually gives us a view through some mesh into the skunk enclosure right there. As we go outside again, we can see more of that enclosure. It is a big mesh box. It's not amazing. It is once again shared with the raccoons. That's why the mesh is there, because they can be escape artists. So we've seen some pretty risky mesh, or some pretty risky fences for the raccoons so far in this video. But yeah, this is the enclosure that Monde Sauvage went with. I'm not a big fan of it. I feel like the ceiling definitely could have been raised a bit to make it slightly better, but that still would be amazing. But yeah, over here we do have a backstage building as well, and that wraps up Monde Sauvage. Next up we have Zoo Na Hrádečku, or Hrádečku, I don't know how to pronounce that. Very simple rectangular concrete enclosure right here. Just some, yeah, it's basically, this is the basic skunk enclosure with, I guess, all the basics you need. Some shelters, some logs and things. There's nothing too much going on here. And then, yeah, even worse, we have Dierenpark de Oliemeulen. They've got even less stuff in here, I guess. But it seems fine-ish at first glance. We only got the one skunk in there. They got their water. They got, I guess, everything they need. But then later, yeah, quite a few more skunks started to show up from the little backstage shelter thing. So we've got at least 5 skunks in here. And I don't know, it just feels way too small for that. So I'm not a big fan of this. But yeah, I am, however, a really big fan of this one at the Zoo of Osnabrück. Here we have a massive enclosure in this little bit of forest. Section of all 40 skunks, I'm pretty sure. At least I don't remember them sharing this with anything else. And yeah, I absolutely love this North America area of Osnabrück over here, because most of the animals here do have large enclosures like this. Actually, behind this enclosure, we've got an enclosure for the Alpine marmot, which isn't from North America. They're just standing in as woodchucks. But yeah, it just keeps going. We are still not at the end of the enclosure yet. We are now just getting close to curving around the back. So yeah, that should give you an impression just of how long this enclosure is. It's actually quite deep as well. So, and throughout the entire thing, we've got little bits of shelters, these same shelter buildings plastered all over the place. And same goes for these little feeders over here. Here they seem to have been quite violent in eating their little fruits, actually for this one as well. But yeah, you can see the same feeding shelter thing being pasted over and over again. Yeah, just a really nice, lovely bit of forest for the skunks. I almost said raccoon. For these skunks to explore over here, so that's nice. And next up we have Pairi Daiza. We're walking up this little hill, getting onto these wooden boardwalks over here, which will give us a view into the raccoon, once again, and skunk enclosure. Not necessarily one of the nicest looking enclosure. It's a little bit barren at the bottom here, and the rusty plates along the edges make everything climb proof, but yeah, it doesn't look the best. It's kind of a bit of a pit as a result of this all. So not my favorite enclosure. The climbing frames are nice for the raccoons, and it is quite spacious, which is nice. You can often see the animals kind of going all over the place, foraging for food. And even when you visit the zoo and you stay over at the resort, you can actually walk around this area during the night, and you can like hear the animals scurrying around in the enclosure in the dark, but you can't really see anything because it's pitch black. So that's also a really cool experience. But yeah, that's it for Pairi Daiza right there. Next up we have Plaswijckpark, which I don't have great footage of, but this should at least give you an impression of the enclosure. It's pretty sizable. Like it's quite narrow, but it is very long, so there's quite a lot of room for the animals to walk around and explore. And also there is an indoor area as well, as you can see over here, which you can look inside. It has very minimal theming and decorating, but there is some theming over there in the back. So yeah, I think it's a pretty cute thing for a small zoo. Then next up we have the Zoo of Plzeň, and we're walking towards the lynx habitat. But if we just look to our right over here, we see a raccoon habitat, which is just kind of sunken into the ground, and it is so freaking lush. I think if there was a raccoon standing here, I wouldn't even have noticed. It's pretty freaking cool. I mean, it's not great that you can't really see the animals all that well, but if you do spot them between the grass, I think that would be really cool. I think they were just kind of sleeping somewhere, I guess. You can see little pastrils going through the grass though. That's really quite cool. Speaking of things that are really quite cool, we are in the North America area of Wildlands, and we are entering the North Hill Sawmill over here. And like I said in Hannover, I love it when zoos create these human spaces that are overrun by animals, and this is exactly one of those areas. So this sawmill over here has been taken over by raccoons, and in the past, skunks. Sadly, these skunks have moved out of this enclosure, which is a real bummer because they really created for some fun shenanigans. As you can see, beware of these skunks in the Raccoon Creek. And of course there's raccoons in the Raccoon Creek as well. Yes, this is a raccoon habitat. But what you're looking at right now, you may not realize, is actually the indoor area for the animals. This office over here has been overrun with skunks and raccoons. And you can see the skunk going into this little box and the raccoon jumping right after. I don't know why they would be pestering the skunks of all things. You should know better than to bully a skunk. But yeah, it's just so much fun to see these animals interact with each other, and that's why it's a bummer that the skunks had to move out. As we follow them outside over here, you can see there was a big glass viewing area into the outdoor area as well. And yeah, let's just quickly touch on the reason why the skunks had to go, because the zoo did give a reason for it. Basically, the raccoons are very messy eaters, and the skunks would always eat all of the things that they drop, and basically the skunks were getting way too fat as a result. So that's why the zoo decided to remove the skunks from over here for their own health. So I guess take that in mind if you want to have a mixed habitat. Maybe you can think of a way to avoid that. But over here at Dierenpark Zie-ZOO, they have no such issues, because for once it is a standalone skunk enclosure. And this is the old enclosure over here. They're actually not in this one anymore. I think this enclosure now has rabbits, if I'm not mistaken, like Flemish giant type things. Actually, if we move across the path over here, this is the new enclosure for the skunk. They literally moved 10 feet into what used to be the Asian small-clawed otter enclosure. So over here you can see their old enclosure. It either has rabbits or it's empty now. I think here it's empty, but later we saw some rabbits. But yeah, this was the old otter enclosure, and now it's a skunk enclosure. So they filled in the pool, and it's now a bit barren, but yeah, I guess the skunks did gain a bit more space now, so that's nice for them. But yeah, let's move along. Let's go to the Zonnegloed over here, the animal rescue, where we have a pretty neat enclosure. It's quite simple, it's quite barren, but what I do like is that the indoor area over here is raised up a little bit, so you can easily look inside. You don't have to kneel all the way to see the skunk sleeping in the hay right there. Of course, to accomplish that, there has to be a little ramp into the indoor area over there that you can see. And yeah, the rest of the enclosure is just simple tree bark flooring with some logs and things strewn about. Yeah, just a decent enclosure for a rescue, I suppose. And then over here at Zoom Erlebniswelt, we have this enclosure right here, which we also saw in the prairie dog video, which has been quite a long time back. And this is what the enclosure looked like 2 years ago, but this year when I came back to this zoo, the enclosure had completely transformed, and it is now a skunk enclosure. As you can tell, they completely planted it. There's tons of grass right now. It's almost unrecognizable from the enclosure that was here before. So it's quite interesting to see how that can change in just 2 years right there. But yeah, that's the new skunk enclosure of Zoom Erlebniswelt. But you have been at the edge of your seat all video wondering about that bite at the start. So here we are at Zoo Bizar. This is actually the smallest zoo in the Netherlands. The entire zoo is basically inside of this one old farm building. And as we go inside, we immediately are greeted by the skunk habitat. Also do note that we are going through a little door right there. So it seems like there is something that the zoo wants to keep out. And yeah, over here we can see the skunk in their enclosure. It's not that great, it's not very big, but there is one thing to this zoo which is quite special. It is bizarre, dare I say, because as we are walking around here, you are technically looking at the enclosure for certain animals, because the animals here tend to have quite a bit of freedom, as you can tell. So let's just, without any further ado, open up the doors to the skunk, because yes, they do actually let the skunk and the armadillo, as you can see, roam free around the room over here, as long as there aren't too many guests. And every time I've been to the zoo, it was on a weekday, so there were not that many people around, and all the animals got to basically walk free for the entirety of my visit. And yeah, here you can see they also get fed a little bit. You can see them playing around, being best buds with the armadillo, and they are really quite calm. You can even pet them. They are incredibly curious and awesome, and it's such a unique experience. I'm not sure I 100% agree with it. It's definitely a great way to leave an impression on people, but things can happen and not everyone is going to react the same way I did when a skunk gets a little too curious and just does a little curiosity nibble. He didn't really hurt, but yeah, some people might not react the same way. The skunk in question, her name is Diva, which is just typical. Did get put away after that as punishment. She basically had to stand in the corner. And when I came back the next year and told the zookeeper about being bit by Diva, she was actually super surprised. So I feel like this is not a very common occurrence, which just makes me feel very special. This is one of my favorite stories to tell, how I got bitten by a skunk at Zoo Bizar and how I got bitten by a giraffe at Zoopark Overland. So I love it. It's completely fine. But to those wondering, by the way, oh, isn't it sad for the animals that they can only be indoors? They can actually go outdoors as well. The door is also open during visitor hours, so you can actually see the armadillo roaming around in the garden right here. And I'm assuming the skunks can do that as well, though I've never seen the skunks outside. So yeah, truly a special place to end the video with. I don't know if it's gonna be useful for a Planet Zoo project, but hey, maybe someone can make a Zoo Bizar recreation. Anyway, that was it for me today. Hope you enjoyed, hope you got some skunk inspiration. Happy October, happy Spooktober. I'll see you all in the next video. Bye bye!